this idea of, well, you need to share your feelings with your partner. Great, but what if I don't actually know what I'm feeling?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of guys I work with. If you say, okay, how are you feeling? Fine. Any more than that? Not really. Okay, it's been a good week. Like that's the level of what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're then saying to that guy to be intimate with your wife, go and share how you're feeling, if all he's got is I'm fine, that's not really an intimate connection. So intimacy really starts with the self, or what I call self-contact.
Chris Jones, you're back. This is awesome. Although it 2 years, I don't know if that counts as being back or not. But I think our last recording was almost 2 years ago. It's crazy. But I'm excited for this topic today because again, I'm a huge believer in most men are not in good recovery. Most people have heard me say that before. I think they're checking off a lot of boxes. I think they're learning a lot, but I don't know how much of that actually translates into good recovery. But for the sake of this discussion, we're going to talk more so around deficits and how I think a lot of the times these men want to be in good recovery, but they don't know how. And a lot of it is just a lack of awareness and a lack of understanding. I think that's the trick with a deficit is not only does the deficit have consequences, because it most certainly does, but I think the tricky thing with deficits is we are kind of unaware of them, hence why they're a deficit in the first place. So if the deficit's causing the acting out behavior and you're unaware of it, that's a huge problem. Chris, speak to that real quick before we dive in.
Yeah, I think it's a great starting point, because quite often we will be aware, or we might have been told, whether it's by therapist, a coach, something we've read, that there's something we need to do. Like an example would be, you need to be more authentic. You need to share your authentic self with your partner rather than hiding stuff away, which we associate with addiction. But of course, that's making the assumption that you actually know what's going on authentically for yourself. So there might be a deficit there to what you're saying in terms of what we call self-contact, actually being in touch, slowing down with what's going on. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And so, this topic of deficits is really important, because as you're kind of alluding to, unless you can start actually understanding them and breaking them down on a slightly deeper level, the behaviors above the surface aren't really going to change. And I think that's what you're referring to in many ways when you talk about not being in real recovery or solid recovery. So very important topic.
Yeah, it's one thing that was said to me from Michelle Mays. She told me there was like just some downtime. I said, "Hey, can I just pick your brain for a second?" And her and I sat down and I asked her, I said, we were talking about this word recovery, and, I was telling her, I said, we're supposed to be recovering what was lost, but it's like, I think for most of these men, it was lost so long ago and or never developed at all. Is recovery even the right word then, right? Maybe discovery would actually be more appropriate, because, did you ever know any of these things? And again, it's, I have a lot of issues with the word recovery, because I think there is an implied finish line, which anybody in recovery knows that there isn't one. But then I think the other problem is it almost makes you feel like there's something you should know that you don't. And it's almost this embarrassing, I guess, kind of shameful energy about it. Whereas I think when really looking at it as, hey, here's what healthy behavior is. Do you do these things? Do you do them well? Because, this is what a healthy human would do. And I think it exposes a deficit to me in a very non-judgmental, non-shameful way of, oh, hey, that's interesting. Tell me more about that, right? So that is interesting. Tell me more about it. That's exactly what we're going to do. So let's kind of go like category by category here. Let's first talk about integrity. A lot of people think integrity is the same as honesty. Those are two different words. The definitions are insanely different. Integrity, the definition is whole, not split, right? Being, the way I always kind of say it is, you have one set of morals and values, and you never bend them or compromise them under any circumstances. You embody them every day, all day. That's integrity. Now, and again, you've heard this before, right? Integrity, if you violate it even once a year, are you a man of integrity? And I think that's the challenge with this, especially for married men, is the second that your wife's brain knows that you can violate your integrity, shoot, I don't know if she'll ever really be able to fully blindly trust your integrity. Is okay, well, he does it most of the time, but when is that day going to be when he decides not to? It's really a challenge. But Chris, I want to talk about this because through my recovery, I learned that I don't value integrity, that honestly, I don't see its utility and why everyone likes it so much. I know that it's so hard to get out of my mouth, but I really had to come to terms with the fact that I didn't see why integrity was something important, because I was getting so much out of constantly shape shifting, bending, molding, being a chameleon. I was like, why be one thing all the time when I can be whatever the person in front of me wants me to be?
Yeah, and I think, again, similar to what I said briefly a minute ago, it's sort of when we tell people you need to act with integrity, so big part of recovery, act with integrity, it's again based on that presumption that that's one of your values, that you actually want to live in integrity. And a lot of people, I would say, probably haven't really slowed down and actually thought about that. So a lot of people, even if we look at the sexual acting out, sobriety or steps towards sobriety or recovery or whatever word we want to use for that will only have occurred after a discovery's occurred. Like most people in this position haven't started recovery off their own back. They've started because of a discovery. And so straight away it started with an external motivation, if you follow my point. And so I think that relates to this integrity question. You've kind of just pretty courageously admitted that for you that maybe wasn't an initial value, and so it was something you had to find. But to your point as well about the building trust with the partner again, like you said there, one of the definitions of integrity would be whole. And so you can't be kind of whole or whole most of the time. There's sort of a picture even in that word. If
Yeah, can you imagine on the first date? I'm pretty darn honest most of the time. Every once in a while, I fib, and when I do fib, I fib in a big way. I can't imagine a second date's gonna happen after that.
No, and ironically, you might be being quite honest in that situation. But yeah, to your point, yeah, probably not a good foundation for a relationship. But this point of I don't know, I guess, how much I need to introduce again this idea of the secret sexual basement, how.
Well, I think it's worth talking about over and over again, because I think, as I've met many of the members of my audience, they've sent me emails, different things. I mean, integrity and this double life is a massive issue. I mean, it is just, I think a lot of my listeners and a lot of my men are really not addicts in the sense that they're addicted to the dopamine being released by a lot of these behaviors. A lot of my guys are engaging in these behaviors because, not for a dopaminergic chemical dependency. A lot of it is just, I don't know, I can't help myself. The opportunity presents itself. And then next thing you know, I already did it, and now I have something to tell my wife about. Right? It's this very opportunistic, circumstantial thing. So to answer your question, how many times do we need to keep revisiting this? I don't think men can hear it enough.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trained in the DST model, deceptive sexuality trauma model, by Dr. Omar Minwala, and we use this central metaphor that I'm sure a lot of people listening will be familiar with already, but this secret sexual basement. So really highlighting that this is a two-part problem, not a one-part problem. This isn't just a sexual acting out problem, whether it's compulsive, addictive, again, different people would have different phrases they would want to use. But there's the sexual problem. So using this basement metaphor, you've got the home above, the family home above, where everything appears normal. Then you have this hidden secret basement underneath, where one of the people in the home, only he knows about it, and he is sneaking down into there to engage in secret sexual behaviors. So that's this kind of picture we have of the basement. And it's really trying to highlight, as I said, this two-part problem. There's the behaviors happening inside the basement, and that's the bit that in 90% of sex addiction programs we focus on. We obsess about what is happening in the basement. And what we're introducing here when we talk about integrity is this other part, this second part of the problem, which is the fact that the basement is hidden in the first place and the pattern of behaviors that are hiding the basement. So a lot of guys will make significant progress on the sexual acting out, but they haven't deconstructed the other behaviors, what we'd call the integrity abuse behaviors in the model, that were keeping the reality of the basement and the reality of the home above separate. So the partner, the wife, the spouse, is living or was living in an intentionally manipulated reality. They were being led to believe this home is all there was. The actual reality of the basement was being hidden. So again, that shows a sort of natural deficit for whatever reason, and it will be different reasons for different people, but that shows that there is a deficit in integrity, a deficit in the ability to tell the truth, but to bring it back to that wholeness point, to live in a whole way where my partner fully knows me and knows the authentic reality of me. I'm actually hiding a significant part of me. Or maybe I'm even living by certain values in the home, portraying certain values, but living by different values by what I'm doing in the basement. So this integrity issue becomes critically important. But again, I think to the point we were touching on, for a lot of guys, the basement in some way perhaps started when they were 9, 10, 11 years old, when they were shamed for trying to tell the truth, or there wasn't a culture in their family or whatever culture they were in of being able to talk about sex or be authentic about things.
They have this strong biological desire that they're not allowed to talk about. They might have gotten in trouble for doing something sexual, porn, masturbation, whatever. So now, in those early, if you get caught at school talking about it or something, and now you're in trouble at school, or in church, whatever, to this point, just for the audience to understand, you now have this strong biological desire to have a sexual experience, but now you can't talk about it. And what's how's that going to play out, right? I can't imagine that well. I mean, and when you look at it, one of my favorite things that Omar has in his training, right, is that it's like this table in front of the window, and there's all these beautiful flowers, and it's friendship, it's spirituality and faith, it's your health and fitness and wellness, right? So all these pots have these different stickers on them, and these beautiful flowers, and then underneath the table, not getting any water, is this little pot with a dead flower in it that says sexuality. And it's basically what he's basically saying is just as important as friendship and health and wellness and fitness and food and nourishment and water is our sexual needs that is inside of all of us. And there's nothing we can do about it. It is a need that needs to get met. We cannot ignore it. And so I think that I love that imagery of what happens when we have this need one would argue is actually a pretty significant need. I mean, especially for a young man. Oh my gosh, I think you're going to be feeling a sexual desire of some kind almost daily, and now you can't talk about it. So again, I just, for the audience, you can kind of see where this is going. I just wanted to kind of further anchor that, because I do think people still hear of this secret sexual basement and they immediately still go to pervert, liar, cheater. I just wanted to give a little bit more context as to this basement was usually invented under a very, in my outlook of it, a pretty healthy circumstance. It really wasn't, this boy was not a pervert, sex abuser. That's not what this young man was. And so when he invented the basement, it usually was not pathological. I think he was bullied into culturally and forced to creating a basement. And then now later we're shaming him for having one. But I think we just kind of got to go back to, why the hell did the boy feel the need to have a secret sexual basement in the first place?
Yeah. And again, we are all sexual, gendered beings. It's part of the human experience. And so if you're suppressing a significant part of who you are, for whatever reason that might be, and as you said, there's that beautiful image of that's the one part of us not getting sunlight, not getting water, not developing, then it makes sense that I've compartmentalized that, but I still want to act on sexual urges. So I build a secret basement, as the metaphor goes, where I can do that. And naturally, there becomes a deficit in integrity, because, I mean, we're literally saying it there. It's a compartment. I'm not whole, and I cannot speak honestly about it.
Yeah. And I just want to pause, just everybody hear that, right? Like, this kid learned to devalue his integrity because he felt very normal biological desires, and he was in an environment where they could not be expressed, discussed in this healthy way, so that he could, and so he had to, I mean, really had to do this secretly. So he basically had to violate his integrity because of the environment. Does everybody understand? And so it basically, before this young man would even think, he has already made the decision. Well, I'm going to be in integrity in every other category of my life except for this one.
And then so on that side, we have again, I don't want to go on from too many tangents. It's sometimes difficult not to with this model, but we would look at the complex sexuality shaping. So how has the person's sexuality been shaped? And one of the things we will often see there, which is what you're referring to, is the constriction, sexual constriction. There is not the ability to authentically act out my sexuality or communicate my sexuality or negotiate my sexuality with my partner, for example. Then on the other side, we have complex gender shaping that occurs. And this is the same problem, but maybe a different presentation. And so this might be the person who has grown up in a world where women were very much objectified. Maybe he saw how his father talked about women. Maybe he saw how his friends and people on the TV talked about women, and the sort of the glamorization of sexual conquest, and that's what it means to be a man, to conquer, to have power over women, to be the popular one in that sense. And so he's maybe built a secret sexual basement. Maybe he's married to his partner, but he's secretly having affairs or engaging in, whatever sexual infidelities might have occurred, as a way of soothing that sort of masculine ego. So you've got two different sides there: the sexual constriction, the guy where it's completely suppressed and hidden. You've then maybe got sexual entitlement that comes out of a desire to prove the person's masculinity. But they might both be things that really started at a very young age through that complex shaping we talk about, but both lead you to the same place, where you are dealing with a deficit in integrity, a deficit in wholeness, and a deficit in the ability to be honest with those people around you about who you really are and what you're really doing.
It's something I'm very passionate about, Chris, because I feel as if these men are being accused of, looked at, and treated in a way that I don't think they deserve to be treated. And hear me out here, because I know there's partners listening to this that are like, screw this guy. Does he have any idea what these men have done to my life? I do understand. I've done it to my wife. I'm not saying, but what I've realized though, Chris, was we have sexual needs and desires. Everyone does. We can't talk about them for a variety of reasons, religious, school, blah, 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 whatever. And on top of that, we have this culture basically saying, James Bond is frivolously sleeping with multiple women on every single movie and marrying none of them. Superbad is a movie about two kids trying to get laid. Ferris Bueller's trying to get some here and there. Just for the longest time, movie after movie after movie after movie. You go to college, and again, what is it almost every guy doing in college? Trying to get his numbers up as high as he can. Largely the reason that he's joining the social clubs he's joining is to increase his abilities to do such things. So my point is, I think it annoys me, I think, how much we blame these guys for being effed up, when to me, I look around at the environment, I'm thinking, why wouldn't they be? We don't create a place in a formative time in life where we need to be discussing this. This needs to be an open conversation, and mom and dad need to be having it. Women, we need the female perspective, and we need the male perspective. And this is this should be happening to every single developing young man. And then on top of that, we need to talk to them about, hey, you're going to be seeing these things on television. That is not real life. You don't get to, these are music videos. This is not how your adulthood's going to go. And by the time you have a house as big as that guy's house in the music video, you're probably going to be married and have kids. So you going out and doing what he's doing in the hot tub is just probably not going to happen. I think this just needs to be a discussion, and no one discusses it. Next thing you know, you're married. I have this mansion, and I have all of these unfulfilled fantasies of music videos that I feel like were supposed to happen for me. So what do? I cheat. I've latched onto these things. I had no place to really talk about them. I've had this secret little fantasy in my head of how awesome my life was going to be when I became wealthy. And then I get there and those fantasies are still there. And again, this is, kind of coming back to this integrity issue. I now have to make a decision. Do I choose the thing that I've been fantasizing about for 14 years and I now finally have the means to do it? Or do I act in alignment to my morals and values? But again, it begs this big question of, did I even have those morals and values to begin with? And vulnerably, I'm going to admit to everyone, I didn't. I wanted to be whatever the person in front of me wanted me to be. That's my morals and values. And I'd be lying to say, Chris, that I've recovered from that, because that's just not true. I lived my first 20 years of my life being a sellout. And it's very hard for me now to stop doing that. That is a successful life is, and my definition is how many guys envy me and how many women wish they could be with me. And that is wrong. I'm trying to change that. But that was my mantra for the first 30 years of my existence. And so to stop that is proving to be more challenging. Now, am I acting on it? No. But is it my first thought most of the time? Unfortunately, yes. It's my first go-to thought, and I have to then re-inject the concept of integrity later, even though it's not my innate go-to strategy. Does that make sense?
It does. And I kind of appreciate how you're sharing that. And I would just put out there that if I were to hear you say instead, like, no, that's completely gone now. No, I don't think about that anymore. That's where the therapist in me would want to be like, okay, tell me more about that. Let's slow down a bit, because I'm always a little bit skeptical about the idea.
Well, and one thing I'll say on that too is, even for the guy who does actually feel like it's out of his life, I think the thing that I would say to him is, yes, for now, but just wait until you're at a position where you feel unappreciated, unadmired. Your last two attempts at things have failed. Will your brain start to want to do some of those old things again? I think that's the thing that I would introduce to guys is, the relapse rate's where it is for a reason. It's because it's easy to be sober when you're trying to be sober. It's when you're going back to living your life and feeling unpleasant feelings. And then your brain says, I know how I can fulfill that. I go off here, I show off, I do all this. And then I feel really respected, admired when I'm doing it. And that's one step in that direction. And then if you keep going in that direction, yeah, something sexual might happen. Anything else on integrity before we go into intimacy?
No, I think it's just, it's good just to riff on that point a little bit more. Of the way I communicate that to my clients is it's when the pressure is applied again.
Yeah.
So what you're saying there, it's like I can feel like I'm in a really solid place. I can feel really good. I can feel like I've left those things behind. But when we're talking about what we call sort of personality level things that really have formed my personality template and have shaped over many, many years, when a bit of pressure is applied, that's when I might revert back to those things. And if I'm in that sort of complacent place of, I've got this, I'm under control, I might not notice it coming. Whereas if I'm in the humble place of, I'm in a safe place, I'm in a healthy place right now, I'm progressing, I'm doing well, but I know that part of me can sort of still be prowling in the background and I need to be aware of it. I'm going to be much more likely to respond well to it when it comes up. And then one other point I just wanted to add, because I don't want to do a disservice to the partners here. I think we've had a good conversation about how men can be pathologized in many ways, where when we zoom out and we see the shaping that's occurred, it can really help us understand how some of the conditions that lead to the secret sexual basement are almost society level conditions that we're dealing with. And so in many ways, it's no wonder that so many men end up in this situation. But I also just want to acknowledge that we are still responsible for our own actions. And so for a partner, I have found actually for many of the partners of the guys I work with and couples I work with, it's actually very helpful for the partner to understand some of that stuff. It can give them more understanding of, it's not something uniquely wrong with me. I'm not the problem. There's other things going on there. But it's also hard for the partner to have too much compassion for that when they have experienced years of being lied to, being manipulated and deceived. And
well, I don't think women are, I think here's what really hits partners hard is I think they knew about this stuff, but I think they thought it was like one-off things or little jokes. Like, I don't think they really knew that from age 12 to 25, guys pretty much think about conquering women uh, in their social circle. I mean, it's a massive, massive, massive thought that is happening. Less for some men and more for others. Kind of depends on your social circle, I think, and what you subscribe to. But I think that's the tough part, Chris, is I think they really start to understand, when they sit around at the lunch table in middle school, they're talking about getting their hair braided and these new bell bottoms at this one store. Yeah, you go over to the guys' table, and yeah, it's a very different conversation, right? They're objectifying women walking around. They're talking about who did what sexually with one. It's two very different conversations happening in the two genders, and I think that's the thing that I think really hits them hard is cultural or not. I think it pisses them off because it's like, it's very offensive and off-putting to come to this realization that these aren't just jokes in movies, that this is actually having a very real effect on the male psychology and how they see women and how they see sexuality and, how they see integrity. I think that's really the issue here is from an early age, a lot of these men are like, I'm going to say one thing and do another. And they're pretty well ingrained in that pattern by the time they're 12. So, I mean, why was integrity supposed to be in them when they just started lying and kept lying? And then that transitioned into image management, which is lying. I mean, that's what image management is. It's manipulating how people see you. And then it just keeps going and going and going. And, by the time they're in their 30s, I think a lot of men don't even really know what integrity is or see any sort of utility and value in it. I think they think integrity is the one they are to their wife and kids. I don't think, you see what I'm saying? Like, I think they think like, oh yeah, integrity. I know what that is. I act like that sometimes. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's like, yeah, I'm a man of integrity in these situations. You bet. I'm a kick-ass father. I'm a great husband. And then when I'm everywhere else, I use something different. But again, integrity is not a gear that you shift into when you need to shift into it. To your point, you're either in that, you either understand that is how the world operates at its best, is every person being in integrity, or you just don't see the value and utility in it. I mean, it's really one of those two options, and it's sad. But yeah, the poor partners, like I think my wife, it was really hard for me to watch her realize how men are and what it's like to be a young man. I think she knew it was a thing, but I don't think she really knew until now. And I think, just to empathize with the partners, I think just because they hear about this doesn't mean that they don't hold it against you. I mean, in the end, all of us have the choice to participate or not. And just because we chose to participate doesn't mean we're going to get forgiven. Right.
Yeah. And so when we think of what's occurring now in the present in the relationship and the traumatic impacts of that, we can kind of hold both things. We can look at the origin story, if you like. We can understand that he is perhaps a product of some of this shaping and some of these things we're talking about. And he is not the victim in the present.
Yeah.
He's the one that's been victimized by that shaping that's occurred to him and the behaviors that he's engaged in. So it's really important that we can sit with both of those things.
And you have to. My wife reminds me all the time, intent and impact are two different things. And it is so true, right? You can not have had the intent of ruining your relationship and the trust and potentially the family unit, and ruin the relationship, the family unit and trust. So just because, like, my wife knows that I did not intend to do this. She knows, but it does not mean that was not the impact. And that is something that, we try to hold both of those of, hey, I get that you did not want to do this. And I get that actually, if you had it your way, you wouldn't have. I get that. And it doesn't change the fact that I was still affected as if you did have the intent of doing it. Same effect, whether, she always reminds me that. I think that's a really big thing for couples to respond, is you do have to hold both. And I think it's really hard to do when both people are hurting. So transitioning into intimacy, I'm going to have you take the lead here, brother. If integrity, I think I've learned a little bit more about, but intimacy, oh man, as somebody who has massive trust issues, as somebody who is narcissistic in way too many areas of my life, where I trust myself only to get my needs met and no one else. It blocks a lot of, having no trust, and then me looking to me for everything, really has severed my ability to have intimate connections with everyone. My own parents, my family members, my wife, my friends, me and you. So I am not I'm going to let you take the total lead here in the intimacy category, because I have a lot of pathology that really makes intimate connections challenging for me. So why don't you introduce and again, just to remind the audience, we're talking about deficits. So why don't you introduce to us, when we're talking about intimacy, what is the deficit we're seeing here, and how do guys kind of integrate that into their recovery?
Yeah, great. So yeah, started with first deficit, integrity. Now moving on to intimacy. And intimacy is an interesting one because everyone knows the word, but I would argue very few people know what it really is in this context. So I would suggest that for a very high proportion of men, if you were to ask them, what is the intimacy like in your relationship? What's your level of intimacy? They would
Twice a
interpret the
week.
question as, how often are you having sex in your
Yeah.
relationship?
Yep. Oh yeah. Once a week, twice a week.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah,
Exactly.
what's the intimacy like? Once a week. Yeah.
Right.
And so when we then maybe start engaging with some therapeutic work or reading some books or developing our knowledge a little bit, we then move to this, oh, okay, I had it wrong. Okay, intimacy is more than just sex. It also means, asking my partner how she's doing, or buying her flowers, or talking about feelings. And so we have that idea of, okay, now I get it. That's what intimacy is. There's some truth in that, but I want to say to people, when we're in that place, we're still missing the building block, the actual starting point of intimacy, which is intimacy with the self. So I was touching on it a bit at the start, that this idea of, well, you need to share your feelings with your partner. Great, but what if I don't actually know what I'm feeling? There's a lot of guys I work with. If you say, okay, how are you feeling? Fine. Any more than that? Not really. Okay, it's been a good week. Like that's the level of what I'm feeling. So if you're then saying to that guy, to be intimate with your wife, go and share how you're feeling, if all he's got is I'm fine, that's not really an intimate connection. So intimacy really starts with the self, or what I call self-contact. And so a huge part of the program I work with guys is really learning to speak the language of emotion, if you like, but really starting it in that place of slowing down and getting into self-contact. So what is going on for me right now in this moment? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? We have this really great acronym, very easy to remember, WTF. So stands for what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And for obvious reasons, it's very easy to remember as well. You can always just think WTF, WTF. But particularly for men, linked to some of that shaping we've spoken about, how often do men slow down and actually get in self-contact? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Versus how often are we doing and achieving and trying to impress people, trying to get a raise at work, trying to get tasks done? We tend to default to the doing rather than the slowing down. And I kind of hate cheesy therapy phrases. There's that one of, are you a human being or a human doing? But there is a lot of truth in it, even though I cringe a bit when I hear it.
Yeah, but I mean, for my population, high achievers, entrepreneurs, it's not as cliche, because I think it's very present for them. They do way more than they be. Most of them actually have demonized being and avoid being.
Yeah, and so that developing that self-contact, that's not to do with getting a task done, achieving something, but just for the sake of being intimate with the self and knowing what's going on, that gives so many insights to the person of, when we're thinking about sexual acting out, or we're thinking about the integrity abuse behaviors, the lying, the deception, it can give so much insight into why I'm doing those things. So, okay, I lied to my wife about what time I was going to be home from work, let's say. Why did I do that? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? What was going on? What was I scared of? What kind of soothing did it give me to tell that lie? How did it make me feel? And so these are skills where, again, there's usually a significant deficit. And perhaps to your point there, perhaps particularly with the clientele you work with, of really knowing what's going on rather than just sort of jumping to the next task. And so we might even find that when we're first challenged with the idea of being authentic and honest, we might just then start throwing stuff at our partner, for example, trying the whole radical honesty thing. But even then, that can betray a lack of sort of self-contact, because I might not be in touch with why I'm doing that. Am I really doing this for her benefit? Am I really doing this to be authentic? Or am I now using her as a sort of emotional punching bag to dump all my stuff on? So there's even stuff there where, again, if we just move from intimacy means sex to intimacy means sharing feelings or asking someone how they're feeling, that's why we're still kind of missing a significant part of it. We need to go right back to the start, self-intimacy, and then out of that comes the ability to relate to other people.
Yeah, and if you see I don't know if have you seen Dan Drake's and the Rab Smiths? I think they whipped together the intimacy pyramid. So it's honesty, safety, trust, and vulnerability, right, as these precursors, right? So we need to feel all of those things. And I think the reason I like looking at that is, especially within the marriage, post betrayal, man, I think about how hard it is to have an intimate connection, right? Honesty, right? So you have to be in this place to be radically transparent with each other, right? And this includes your partner. I've asked my wife, through the process, I said, hey, it's okay if you look at my stuff, but can you tell me after you do it? So like, she'll be like, hey, I went through your social media history a couple hours ago. I just wanted to, she'll like text me. So, cause that was what I was like, hey, listen, I get it. I violated your trust. But I also don't like all of this like secret weird stuff that you're doing behind my back. I just doesn't make us feel like we're this dyad, this two-person unit when you're sneaking around spying on all my stuff. So you can do it. Just tell me that you're doing it so that we have this transparency. But the safety piece, right? How many partners are safe to share this information with, truly, because if I say it to you and you make it about you and make it about, how it's not that fun for me to come be radically transparent with you. And I know, again, these poor partners would probably listen to me and be like, screw this Roland guy. But again, we have to just think about these things. If we're trying to create an intimate connection between the two of us, we do need to work really hard at creating men and women need to create a safe environment for transparent discussions. That can't be these consequences. If every time I tell you there's like a 4-day consequence, I don't know how much my body's going to feel very safe with you around being like this. So again, I'm just, I know everyone wants this intimate connection, but there's some building blocks here that are foundational. But the one that I wanted to get to was vulnerability, because that's what you were really talking about, Chris, was, to me, what I found through recovery was where a lot of intimate connection really started happening was I would vulnerably share with my wife. Now, so what's this look like? As you guys probably remember, when I went into this discussion with Chris about intimacy, I said, I'm going to defer to you because I have a lot of pathology around a distrust of others and a tendency to look to myself only for getting my needs met and trusting no one else to, right? So I just do me, and then I do things for them until I can get, very, a love avoidant kind of ideology. So now my wife says something, let's say it leads into an argument. I would come to her a couple hours later, and I would vulnerably, right? Vulnerable, one of the elements of intimacy. I would vulnerably tell her, hey, when you did that, the thing that came up for me was you were attacking my recovery. You were accusing me of doing things that I didn't do, and doing things that I've never done. And I felt the need to defend myself. Right. So it's, I guess where I'm getting at there, Chris, is, and I'd love for you to say this, I think it's hard for men to be intimate when they are disconnected from self, for one, yes. But I think let's choose a step kind of before that, because I think connecting to self is a big ask for a lot of these guys, especially in this environment. But I think kind of a precursor to that would be do you know enough about your pathology to be able to be vulnerable and intimate with it? Because I do think if you don't know enough about your process addiction and the ins and outs of it, it's hard to have this really vulnerable, connected conversation around, hey, when I acted that way, I have this pathology and I've had it my whole life where, when that happens, my instinct's just to lie. It happens so fast. And I hate that about myself and I want that to change. But hey, would you mind if you're going to start asking me stuff about this, would you mind sending me an email and then even in CC my sponsor or CC my therapist on it so that I can get with my therapist or get with my sponsor about, hey, she wants to know this. I don't want to lie to her. And so I can prevent myself from lying to you. And I know that was a long thing there, but I was just, one thing I've learned about intimacy is it's less about hugs and kisses and me patting there, pats on the back. A lot of it's been about me, Chris. A lot of it has been about me telling my wife about the things that suck about me and what I'm doing to fix them. And you would think that how weird is that would create intimacy, but Chris, it does. It probably has created the most amount of intimacy of anything that we've done since recovery.
Yeah. And there's a sense of, I don't want to be too flippant about it, but if the partner's been massively traumatically impacted and devastated by what you've done, and then you start sharing, well, there's these really crappy parts about me, it's not exactly a big surprise to them. It's kind of music to their ears of, well, obviously, because look how much I'm in pain. Thank you for recognizing that part of yourself. There's actually safety in, I'm more safe with someone that knows the ways that they are a bit crappy than someone that's crappy but thinks they have it all together.
Yeah, really.
So to your point, like, it maybe sounds counterintuitive at first, but there's a lot of safety to be had from someone that knows their weak points. And I think it comes back to the heart of what I was saying with, it starts with self-intimacy, because I can't share what I don't know. I can't be authentic about what I don't know. And to your point, I'm going to jump in and take the side of the partners again. That intimacy pyramid. So there's vulnerability, but it starts with, I should have remembered that before I started this. It starts with,
it's honesty, safety, trust, then vulnerability.
Safety, trust, yeah. So this is where the self-contact, so I touched on it earlier, also goes to not just what I'm thinking and feeling, but what would my motivations be here for sharing something. So I talked about maybe the partner becoming almost an emotional outlet for me to just vent all my stuff and make myself feel better. If I haven't done the honesty, safety, trust thing yet, if the partner's not feeling safe in the relationship, I can't expect her to then be really receptive and open to hearing all of my venting and thankful that I'm being so open with her. So that's where a lot of therapeutic wisdom needs to come into the situation. You need to be able to read what is going on. Where is your partner at right now? Have you built some safety? And then absolutely, when the time is right, vulnerability becomes one of the most beautiful, powerful things we can bring to the relationship. But hopefully you see where I'm coming from with that.
Really challenging if you're a liar. Yeah, if you're a liar, then I mean, there's really not a lot of meaningful conversation that can happen, because all their brain's telling them is, maybe. Why is he saying this? Is he saying this so I don't leave him? He said, it's just, there's all sorts of distrust, right? And so it doesn't, that's the reason I love that pyramid, is it shows you, hey, there's some precursors here before you can have these vulnerable moments that really create the intimacy. All right, in our last couple minutes together, we'll have to rush this one, but integration. That's our third piece. Correct? Did I write that down right? Talk to us about that. Help us understand the deficits that people, addicts, compulsive men are dealing with from an integration standpoint.
Yeah. So we've got those three I's: integrity, intimacy, and now integration. And there's organically quite a lot of overlap, because we talked about integrity meaning wholeness, and integrated is another sort of play on the word integrity. But when we're working with it in this model, we're really thinking of integration being linked to what we were just talking about, actually knowing the parts of myself, the drivers behind things, knowing in the model we refer to shadow integration. It's from Jungian psychology, this idea that all people have a shadow. They have the part of themselves that they're not comfortable with, that they suppress, even like the sexual part we were talking about earlier. And so integration means, have I been able to fully integrate my psyche, to integrate that shadow, integrate the uncomfortable parts? Have I been able to bring my whole self to the relationship? Have I deconstructed the compartment of the secret sexual basement?
Mhm.
Because if we think of the person who has built and maintained or is maintaining a secret sexual basement, they are literally living a compartmentalized life. They're
Mhm.
living one way here, they're living one way over here in the basement. So integration means bringing those together and being the whole person, if you like.
And I think that's where groups shine, in my opinion, is, it's one thing, I always say the sex addiction field's funny. It's like a lot of this is like college, right? Like you're going and like learning about stuff, but like life is entrepreneurship. Like it's one thing to get your degree in business, and graduate and put your little cap on and put your tassel to the other side. But like, business is not about memorizing stuff and passing tests, right? It's about a viable plan. It's about testing and bouncing ideas off of people and testing your knowledge to know if that's how I kind of liken integration is. To me, it's really difficult to do this alone. And even with a therapist, I think it's where integration really starts to come together is in that group setting, right? Where you're starting to actually see practical applications of a lot of these issues. And I think the group's really nice because it can show you why you may have an integration issue by somebody else bringing up their integration issue, right? It might be something you were completely unaware of until they brought it up, which I think is critical, which tees us up nicely to kind of introduce this this thing you've been doing. I know I've sent men over to you before. Can you introduce to the audience how, with these, it's not just the 3 eyes, but you have a 16-week kind of approach that you do with this. And it's a small group of guys, correct? 8, is that what I heard?
Yeah, 8 maximum.
Which I really love that. I like that number. So Chris, talk to, so if people are listening to this and they're starting to feel like, I do have deficits in these areas, what's this program look like? How often do you do it? If somebody was to, if there's somebody who wants their husband to look into this, or if somebody listening to this wants to look into it for themselves, where do they go? How do I go about doing this? Talk to us a little bit about the program.
Yeah, so I run my website's the chrisjonestherapy.co.uk website, but I run this treatment program that I call the From Harm to Healing program. And it's very much based on the DST model. And some people might be familiar with Dr. Minwala's program, the Be a Better Man program, that's very focused on psychoeducation about the model, really highlighting the harm of the secret sexual basement, integrity abuse, how the partner is harmed, is victimized by those things. And what you find is in this field, there's a lot of people who are really passionate about that work, about the DST model, but very little out there to actually work with it. So I really worked for a pretty extensive period of time on developing a program around that. So there's an online course, webinars, it's about 70 videos now, I think, that breaks it down into 3 sections. The illumination, so really psychoeducating about the model, really giving the participants a deep understanding. But then critically, the application part, which is about how do we actually start applying this, changing these behaviors, trying to build some of these deficits we've spoken about. And then there's what we call the attending section, the 3rd section, which is how do I learn to better attend to the trauma that is now in the relationship and the trauma that my partner is now potentially experiencing. So we're looking at application. How do I start working on my deficits, on the integrity abuse, on the lying, the deception, but also how do I show up better for my partner?
Mm-hmm.
And we do it in this 16-week group format, meeting once a week, go through the program together, and then really process it as a group. Because, again, as you alluded to earlier, my view is we can actually do that work more powerfully in a group setting than I can even do one-to-one with a guy in individual therapy, because there is just something about the conditions you can create in a group of men who are working through the same things that you can't really replicate anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the main thing I offer. I also offer an individual guided self-study program for people that can't make the group time but want to maybe work through it individually with me. And we actually have one coming up at the end of August, which is going to be 16 weeks running on Fridays at midday UK time. So that's going to be, if I've got it right, 7 a.m. Eastern time, people who are early risers. And so, yeah, if people are interested, they can reach out about that.
Yeah, awesome. And Chris, I think I've told you this before. I very first got introduced to you. I can't even remember where that was, but I've loved your approach. The DST model, I think, works really well with my population, high achievers, entrepreneurs. It's more needs to be looked at than your inability to regulate your emotions, and so you're going to turn to porn. It's just, this conversation, I think, is a much bigger conversation. There's some very core human issues that are lacking, and it's not. It doesn't always end up in sex addiction, but it can. And I think that's really what we need to look at is, what deficits do I have, and is it opening doors that shouldn't be open? But Chris, this was awesome, man. As always, maybe we'll have to do it again inside of 2 years this time. But I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, no, it's been great to be back, and I feel we could probably talk for hours about this and not run out of things to say.
I think we said that last time too.
Yeah, maybe again in the future.